A woman spent the night embracing her husband's coffin. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes burned, and a single name trembled on her lips. Outside, a kingdom was collapsing. Inside was her mind unraveling. Or had the world simply become too narrow to contain her? This is the story of the woman history called Mad. But the real question is this: was she truly insane? Or was she made that way? In 1479, within the cold stone corridors of the palace in Toledo, a young girl was growing up. Her name was Juana. She was the third child of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, the rulers who united Spain under a single crown. Her hair was chestnut brown, her gaze sharp, her intellect intense enough to impress even the finest scholars of the era. But Juana was never raised to rule. That destiny belonged first to her older sister, Isabella, then to her brother, Juan. Juana was merely a reserve, beautiful, intelligent, but ultimately a bargaining piece, a political instrument, a seal to strengthen alliances. Her mother never said it aloud. But Juana felt it, growing up within the palace walls, those corridors as cold as carved marble. She sensed that her mother's attention was always fixed on her sister, her father's ambitions centered on her brothers. Juana stood quietly in the margins, already beginning to question her own place in existence. And then, in 1496, everything changed. Her mother's strategy moved into action. Juana would marry Archduke Philip, son of Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian. She would sail to Flanders, cross foreign seas, and live in a land whose language she didn't speak. No one asked what she felt. Queens are not asked, queens obey. But when Juana arrived in Flanders, she encountered something no royal education, no religious discipline, and no maternal strictness had prepared her for. Love. The first time she saw Philip, Juana froze. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a face so striking that European courts had already named him Philip the Handsome. The title was not an exaggeration. His smile altered the air in a room. His voice flowed like silk. His presence drew people in effortlessly. It drew Juana in too, with such force that the emotional intensity she had suppressed for years beneath Spanish discipline and Catholic restraint erupted like a volcano. Juana fell madly in love. But this was not the beginning of a fairy tale. It was the slow ignition of a fuse. Philip was not in love with Juana. Philip was in love with power, with splendor, with the calculation that after Isabella, Juana would inherit Spain. In the bedroom, he appeared devoted. In palace corridors, he entertained countless mistresses. Juana knew. She felt it. And that knowledge began to eat her from the inside. Jealousy, anger, despair. Such emotions did not suit a queen. But Juana could not hide them. When Philip spoke to a court lady, her vision darkened. When he returned late at night, her hands trembled. When he turned his face away, she wept, openly. That was when the whispers began. The queen is unstable. She lacks balance. She loses herself in jealousy. For a while, they were just whispers, until the year 1500 changed everything. Her sister Isabella died. Within a few years, her brother Juan followed. Juana was no longer the spare. Juana was the sole heir to Spain. When Queen Isabella received the news, her eyes turned fully to Juana for the first time. In that gaze, Juana felt something new. Not affection, utility. Juana was now valuable, because Juana was now Spain. But there was a problem. Juana didn't want to be Spain. She wanted Philip. She wanted to remain at his side, to win his attention, to steal even a fragment of happiness from that poisonous love. The throne, responsibility, sovereignty. These felt as cold and distant as the palace walls of her childhood. Philip saw this, and he used it. He turned Juana's emotional vulnerability into a weapon. When she was distressed, he offered attention, not out of love, but strategy. When she experienced emotional crises, he intervened, reinforcing the impression that she was unstable. Slowly, carefully, Philip constructed a narrative. Juana was mad, and if Juana was mad, Philip would rule Spain. To him, that was worth everything. When Queen Isabella died in 1504, the calculation became reality. Juana was officially proclaimed Juana I, Queen of Spain. But two forces entered the arena, Philip and Ferdinand. Philip sought to seize his wife's throne. Ferdinand sought to crush his son-in-law's influence, and at the center stood a woman being maneuvered by both, Juana. Yet something crucial was overlooked. Juana's instability may not have been real at all. Modern historians believe many of her so-called episodes were exaggerated, or even fabricated, by political interests within the court. Ambassadors who met her described a woman of sharp intelligence, diplomatic awareness, and clarity of thought. Those reports remained in private chambers. The story of her madness spread across Europe. Then, in 1506, Philip died, 38 years old. Sudden illness. Juana's world collapsed, emotionally and politically. After his death, she refused to separate from his coffin. It traveled with her from town to town. At night, she sat beside it, speaking. To Philip? To herself? Or to a silence she refused to accept? History recorded this as proof of insanity. But pause for a moment. Was Juana truly mad? Or was she a woman stripped of love, manipulated by her father, used by her husband, labeled unstable by a court that needed her powerless, clinging to the last thing she had left? History has never answered that clearly. But it did determine her fate. Her father Ferdinand declared her unfit to rule and assumed regency himself. Juana was confined to the palace of Tordesillas, first for rest, then effectively for life. 50 years. Juana spent 50 years in Tordesillas. Her hair turned grey, her eyes dulled. The sharp gaze that once burned in Toledo's corridors faded, or was extinguished. Visitors reminded her she was still Queen of Spain. Sometimes she smiled, sometimes she signed official documents. Sometimes she offered remarkably sound political opinions. Those who met her recorded that, despite decades of confinement, her mind appeared intact. Yet the doors remained locked. Juana died in 1555 at 75. Look at what remained. Her son, Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen. Spain, Germany, the Netherlands, southern Italy, and the newly discovered lands of the Americas, an empire on which the sun never set. And the legal foundation of that empire? Juana. Throughout Charles's reign, his formal title derived from her rights. Charles, king by the grace, inherited from his mother, Juana. The so-called mad woman was the legal pillar of the greatest empire of her time, and she spent 50 years locked in a room. So the question cannot be avoided. Was Juana truly insane, or was she the victim of one of history's greatest acts of political theft? Perhaps the true madness lay elsewhere. Perhaps it belonged to the men who feared a woman's mind more than they feared losing a kingdom.